Now you're Norton here. What's the story with this one?
This is our 2010 vintage. We're probably a little behind on some of our Norton vintages. We like to keep them about 3 or 4 years in our cellars or in the tanks before we bottle them. Our Nortons are done typically with barrel staves in stainless steel tanks.
Okay.
We found that we have the ability to really control the oak so that it doesn't get too much or too little. And then we can add. We use combinations of heavy toast French and American oak, and then of course a lot of the staves that are toasted on all 4 sides. So you get these nice flavor components being pulled out of those wines, and then you leave them on there. It's easier to clean. You don't have the loss of the barrel if you get a bacteria, because you get in a stainless steel tank. Now, is it ideal? Probably not, because there are certain characteristics you can't get from doing it that particular way. But we're limited on space in our particular winery, so for us, using a stave and controlling the oxygen, but also controlling the amount of flavor that's coming from the barrel staves, it works with our particular style.
It's, oak is 2 things. From what I've learned and told people over the years, is that it's a reduction pan and a spice rack. So you may not be necessarily using it as a reduction pan, but you're using the oak as a controlled spice rack just to kind of add certain flavor components. And yes, if you age it too long in oak, you don't want to have it oxidizing, right? So but you're still allowing it to mellow and soften and interact and get those caramel, the vanilla, the coconut, dill components from the American and French toast flavors.
Well, and you look at the grain on French oak's tighter, so it imparts it differently, whereas the American milk is more open and more aggressive. So that's why we decided to use combinations of those to do our wines. Something I started years ago when I started making wines was so many of the wineries were taking Norton, fermenting it very, very warm, trying to extract all this color out of it, and then they tended to develop these green bean, green pepper type of characteristics. And I wanted something with more fruit, more berry. And what we wound up happening was I started looking at different yeasts and cooler yeasts. And I was very fortunate. Paul Monk, who used to be a Lallement yeast, worked for a Lallement company. Paul's passed away, but he came to Missouri one year, and I had the good fortune of spending a day with him here in Hermann in my winery and tasting through wines. And he made some suggestions, and from that point on, we started doing different things with our Norton. We were hand punching down a lot of our Nortons, or pumping over in smaller tanks and things. And he suggested doing Nortons with these particular different yeasts. And he says, develop layers of flavoring, like you were just kind of talking about.
Yeah.
And what we started doing is fermenting them all separately, punching down or pumping them over, and then when they were needed, then put them in the press together after they've been fermented out, and starting to put all these flavors components together. And it started to give our wine some really nice depth of flavor and different components that we weren't getting with a lot of the other Nortons that I was tasting. And we ferment our wines a lot cooler, trying to maintain, instead of having a lot of these beautiful fruit aromas and flavors staying in the wine. When you ferment too warm, they just get blown off and volatile. So by fermenting cooler, we tend to be able to keep. We don't maybe necessarily get all the color of the traditional wines, but you retain these nice fruit and berry characters.
Well, I mean, you're going for you're blending, you're doing doing small lots, correct? To understand this, or bring this out. So you're going small lots and then blending to kind of a vintage or house style for yourself. And you know, you're not worried about the color. The color in Norton is naturally there, but you know, people don't want green vegetable taste in their wine, whether it's Cab Franc or whatever. It's just that's underripe fruit.
Right.
And you know, and some of my notes on this, and I still get this, is you get that mushroom, the blackberry, some vanilla, and then there's a cream notes to this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this has a nice softness, but it has that weight that pushes down on your palate. And the thing that really impressed me about Norton was years ago I had a dinner gathering with a friend of mine from California that I deer hunt with. So we were doing a bunch of big California wines, and Glenn came over, and invited Glenn, and he brought a Missouri Norton. And we were serving pasta and grilled venison that night. And I was amazed at how well the Norton held its own against some of the big Napa Sonoma names on the table that night, and just paired wonderfully. And I always tell people, I go, if you like lamb and wild game, or you want that big wine, find a good Missouri Norton. Try, you know, if someone wants to try something, brown bag it with some friends, or, you can go to Whole Foods or Schnucks and buy bison.
We've had some experiences with that with friends of mine, especially out in California, who have taken our Norton in a brown bag, and people are, you know, at the end of the night, they say, okay, let's display the wine. And during the time frame, or prior to that display, everybody's like, oh man, we really like this wine, we really like this wine. And when they find out it's from Missouri, then they start backtracking because they were expecting it to be something
from California.
Yeah. And we chose a style of Norton that is more Syrah, Sangiovese-like, in my mind, than the traditional Cab Merlot that a lot of people try to steer their Nortons to.
Northern Italy, southern France kind of thing.
You get this nice spice. That's what our Norton gets. You get a lot of nice spice, and you get some, like I'm getting right now today out of this particular one. And then Nortons have this incredible ability to change, and they change from year to year after a period of time.
This one has, well, my notes were the 2009, but this one you get the pepper.
Right.
I get a lot of pepper with this. I still get the vanilla. You get that dark berry fruit. You have that creaminess.
On the finish, I get this dark cherry. Dark cherry, but it's got a little bit of tartness to it.
Yeah.
On the finish.
And it has a nice acidity. But what's nice is that you have that long string of tannins that are just connected. It's not this choppy, rough mouthfeel. It has this soft, silky, seductive feel to it. It makes you want to really take that next sip. And this is something that you could have with smoked ribs, a steak, or any kind of wild game dish.
My favorite Norton meats, so to speak, are duck and lamb.
Oh.
I love lamb. Easter, Rosé and Norton are the two wines that I will do on Easter because I love lamb. And then duck, whether it's wild or even tame.
Favorite way to cook the duck with this?
I don't cook it. I don't get a chance to do duck a lot. I just Dave Cross, who used to be at Stonehill years ago, he just did a simple butter and a little bit of wine and some salt and pepper, and he had a spice recipe or kind of an all-purpose spice that he developed.
Yeah.
And can't get it anymore because lost track of Dave over the years. I think he's still down in Birmingham somewhere.
Dave, if you're watching, can you
yeah, send me some of what their stuff. He used to call it like red sand is what he used to call it. The closest thing I'd like to it is, I don't know if you've heard of Tony, I call it Shashirs. It's in a green, it's a Louisiana spice.
I have it in my rack.
Yeah.
Chatterans.
Or yeah. I use that stuff, and that's what I like to put with my duck and use it, and then just sometimes it's just bake it and just do this really nice. Put it on a grill. Sometimes I'll grill it first, get some a little bit of smoke, and then I'll finish it off in the oven with a little bit of butter and wine sauce, kind of reduced down. And then I'll take some Norton and reduce it down and just make a little sauce. Either that, or then I'll take it because our Berry Black has a lot of Norton in it. I'll take it and reduce down a little bit of that and have this like blackberry sauce with the
So you squirrel hunt, you deer hunt, you duck hunt. I mean, when we finally get around to getting the filming of wild wildlife, what do you see doing for the big hunts?
I guess it depends on when we film it and what we'll have available to us.
What would you like to do?
I would love if we could figure it out. I mean, we have an abundance of deer in this particular area, which is kind of cool, but we also have quite a few turkey. I would love to be able to get out there and kind of pair it with a spring or fall turkey season. Fall's kind of tough to do because we've got harvest and everything else going on, but maybe in the springtime we could do a spring turkey season.
Spring turkey season's like a chess game.
Yeah, it's tough.
It is.
It really is tough. So, I mean, if we're doing it during the week and things like, we can maybe make it work during fall. But I haven't turkey hunted for a lot of years. I enjoyed it, but there's so much going on at the winery during that time frame. It's tough to get away to just go, even walk in the woods and go up and do turkey. But it's something I really, really would like to play around with. Don't have a lot of duck coming into this area anymore. So it's real sketchy there.
What about rabbit?
Rabbits are hit and miss also. We've got a lot of coyotes in this area. And we don't, right now, there's about 4 different packs that are around in different areas, the east, northwest, east, and that we have around here. You can hear them all getting going in the middle of the night sometimes. Drives my dog nuts. So our rabbit population is not real good. I'd love to, growing up, coyotes weren't really prevalent. We didn't have a lot of it.
I'm thinking that the 2 things that have destroyed the Missouri rabbit population and quail population would be the growth of coyotes, but also the loss of the family farm, going from the small, fields with all the hedgerows to where, you drive on your way here, you no longer see the 50-acre things with a hedgerow that gives them the ideal food and then cover. It's these 1,000-acre fields that there's nothing for them to hide.
Well, or everything's been turned into, instead of row crops, it's all hay.
Yeah.
Fescue, and that is not conducive,
to quail,
to quail and rabbit, and so that becomes a problem. So, and then which is kind of good and kind of bad. We have from a rabbit population, our lynx or wildcat population has increased over the years. The coyotes are the biggest one there. They're the biggest predator that we have, and they have mated with enough dogs that people have dumped off that they become the coy dogs in the pack, and they become very. They're no longer afraid of humans, and they come very, very close. I mean, there are nights when they're running through my parking lot as a waiter.
That is the sad thing. Down in southern Missouri, I mean, we have the same issues. Only we also have feral hogs on top of it now.
We don't have feral hogs yet.
That's the key.
I'd love to go hog hunting.
Come on down to southern Missouri.
That would be.
It's not as lush as this. I can't promise. We did a hunt a while back. We did this nice little hunt, and not one pig jumped. It looked like we were raising them on the property, but nobody saw a thing. So I can't. But I guess that's why it's called hunting, and not butchering.
Exactly.
But the locals all tell me that, especially when the economy went south, people are just dumping all their dogs.
You can always tell when the economy's bad. We get dogs left and right.
Yeah.
Left and right. I mean, and they just, I don't know. I think people think that they're going to make it.
Or the farmer will adopt them.
Right. Most of them starve to death,
or they get eaten or shot.
Yeah, you know, they'll get shot if they get so hungry that they go after a farmer's chicken or something. Well, they're going to wind up dead.
Yeah,
you know,
and it's a sad, heartbreaking thing. I mean, my dog that I rescued, that I said I wasn't going to become attached to, and that was 2 years ago, was a dog that somebody had dumped in southern Missouri.
Right. We've had so many dogs at the winery that have been dumped off, but because of the amount of people we have, and the liability of having an animal at the winery, we have cats, which help the rodent population keep that down in check.
Yeah,
which keeps what's, you know, my mom always said, if you have cats, you don't have mice. If you don't have mice, you don't have snakes. And so that has a lot to do with our picnic tables.
Oh. That's one thing I like about cats. I've seen them kill snakes. And
we used to have, I mean, especially in when we have a lot of rainfall, and the copperheads and stuff come out of the creek banks where they're in the rocks.
Yeah.
And when they get flooded, and then they come up, and the cats are pretty good about, with all the cats and stuff. We have not seen a lot of copperheads for a while. During the '93 flood, the vineyards were just stupid up there with copperheads. I mean, I've never seen so many copperheads in my entire life.
I don't think I would walk through your vineyards in '93 unless I had a 410.
Well, you didn't know. Well, I was doing I had a 22 revolver with shot shells in it, just to take them out, because it was stupid. I mean, snakes were up there.
I said, out in California, they talk about, they get rid of the rattlesnakes in the vineyards, they have a problem with voles. Right. And you hear a lot of people talk about organic or biodynamic or self-sustainable. Like, why doesn't somebody raise and sell king snakes to some of these wineries, or raise black snakes? I mean, that way you have a predator snake that's killing your copperheads or your rattlesnakes as well as all the rodents.
Well, unfortunately, so many people see snake
and they kill it.
You know, I mean, the black snake is one of those that you have to educate people. Don't kill the black snakes. They will absolutely keep your poison snakes down. They kill the copperheads. It's amazing what they do. On the side, when I was growing up, my grandma had a chicken house.
Right.
And in that chicken house, when she lifted up the brood, where they were laying hens, at the very end, she had this long brooder rack, and at the very end, in this one little thing, was about a 8-foot long black snake. And she would lift this board up, and she'd reach underneath the chickens, or if the chickens were out, she would collect the eggs. And every morning when she would collect eggs, she would give that snake 3 eggs. And every morning, that snake, I could go in there, that thing would be hissing like crazy at me. Never hissed at my grandma, ever.
Really?
She would put that thing right down in front of him and put those eggs in right in front of him. She never lost any eggs due to the snake. She never had a copperhead in the chicken coop.
I remember as a little kid gathering eggs out of the chicken coop at my aunt and uncle's place. You know, when you're 7, 8 years old, it's a very fond memory. But they always said, be careful of copperheads.
Right.
You know, and yeah, that is because she said, she goes, one time I saw 2 copperheads in there that were each about 4 foot long. I'm like, oh yeah, that's something that gives the 6-year-old nightmares.
Yeah, oh yeah. You know, but no, we grew up with snakes on the property, but you never saw one in the chicken house because of that big black snake. You know, just didn't see it.
So you're touring the wineries and you see a black snake, let it go. Let it go. Now what's the next wine that we're on?
Well, the next wine we're going to do is a wine called Impulse. Okay. Impulse was just a fun wine that we decided to do last year. Believe it or not, it was actually the alternative it's Chamberson,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the alternative rosé material
Really?
to what our rosé was made out of. Like I said earlier, we either do Chamberson or Norton for rosé. This one just didn't cut the mustard as a dry rosé, and it was slightly out of balance from a dry standpoint. But the quality of the wine was so good, we decided to work with some sweetness to it, and added a little bit of sweetness and balanced the wine out. And the crazy thing is, we entered it into the Jefferson Cup last year, the big competition, and won the Jefferson Cup with it.
This is fun. I mean, I wouldn't describe it as sweet. I would describe it more as off dry.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you're looking for something that, let's say you do real spicy, burn your mouth kind of food, this would be something that would really work. It is a nice alternative to a Riesling that
It doesn't have that traditional. To me, I'm not a big, huge Chamberson fan. Although we've had some wonderful Chamberson rosés over here. Again, I think it's due to the fact that we ferment very, very cool, so we don't get those big vegetative components to it. Which is this one here. You don't get any of that vegetation with this particular wine. You get these nice fruit tones, and we try to balance. That's one thing I work with Michael. All our wines, we really try very hard to make our wines balanced, and I think that's something that unfortunately there are some wineries that just don't work on balance, and the wines get out of balance, and they're either too cloyingly sweet or they're so dry and out of balance that it's like, it was described to me years ago by a winemaker friend of mine that said, from California, it said, you can only make a wine do so much. And if it doesn't want to go there, it's not going to go there, and it's going to be terribly out of balance. So you have to try to balance your wines within reason based upon what that wine wants to do.
It's, you know, the example I've often used is they were saying that when they were doing hot sauce contests, it was all based on heat, and then they learned that, you know, people just entering, anybody can make a hot sauce, and then they made it based 50% on heat, 50% on flavor. So then they had to say, okay, how do we balance the heat with the flavor, you know, or whether, you know, you're going to balance this on the bottle. Okay, well, you have to evenly somehow distribute the weight. So how are you going to? Where's that line at to make where the structure of the wine with the acidity, and I mean, do you want to extract the color? I mean, and the nice thing is, at least in Missouri, unlike California, I don't think you're allowed to add water to your wine to lower that alcohol.
You can ameliorate to some extent, but once you do that, then your flavor changes, your aroma changes, your balance changes to the point to where, it just becomes, So, I mean, that's something we don't do here at all. I know some places that have done it in the past, and then
they're picking at high sugar levels,
exactly.
Zero acid.
Well, either that, or even after they get it in there, they ameliorate with water because it becomes volume orientated. It becomes profitable. It becomes profit basically by adding water to it. And what winds up happening though is the wines are just so disjointed and out of balance, and so they try and cover it up with sweetness. And then it's, to me, it's just Kool-Aid and sugar water, and it's not really wine anymore.
No.
You know. And so what we try to do is really try to make the wine balanced. And I learned years ago, you know, if it doesn't meet our standards, there's no sense in even putting it in the bottle. I mean, figure out something for it.
This, I mean, if you like spicy Asian food, this would be a wonderful wine to have.
As a red wine, this is really good. Or as, you know, we don't bring it today, but Traminette's my other favorite to go with Asian food. You get that honeysuckle and apple kind of characteristic. that it goes great. You know, but this has this nice, almost like a little plum kind of characteristic in the background. It's kind of like a dusty rose and plum and almost like watermelon.
Yeah.
I get this when I put this in my mouth. You get that.
There's a little berry in this also.
You get that sweetness from the watermelon when you first bite into it, and then it goes to drying out towards the rind.
It dries it. It has a dry finish that makes you salivate. So you're looking forward to that next bite of food. It has that sweet beginning that would cool you down from that spicy food, but it has a dry finish.
And it's not so sweet that it blows that food component out. You know, and I think it was such a cool thing to come up with a new wine and then win a Jefferson Cup with it last year was just absolutely cool.
That says a lot about it.
Yeah.
And I really recommend that if you don't know what the Jefferson Cup is, please look it up on the internet, check out who Doug Frost is, and you'll have a whole new respect for or admiration because
it's a tough competition.
It's a tough competition. Anybody can submit a wine for a rating, and there's a lot involved with politics, buying advertising, and you really don't see, you know, the trade magazines review Missouri wines. So these competitions, if you're going to look for something that is been reviewed, go with the competition.
The Jeff Cup is really such a cool thing because, again, it's an invitation only. You don't get in unless you're invited. And Doug and his people invite what he considers the best of the best from all the winemaking regions in the United States. And then they're basically thrown in together. And it's you know, you'll have anywhere from typically 600 to 900 wines, you know, in this. And I think the most I've ever seen is like 16 Jefferson Cups awarded out of all of that. And that's not a high percentage.
No.
So to get a Jefferson Cup is or to even be nominated. I mean, I think last year we got a Jefferson Cup for the Impulse, but we were nominated for 3, which is cool enough just from that standpoint.
And you've also won your share of Governor Cups.
I've won one, but came close a few times. But we won one with a Norton back in 2000, I believe, with a 97 Norton. You know, and I think that's one of the things that people don't realize is the Missouri wine competition is a really, really tough competition because you have some very, very well-made wines, and it's not like going to a California competition. You put your wine in, and like we were talking earlier, how our wines really will stand out because it's so unique compared to all these other flavor components of, you know, it's just another Chardonnay, it's just another Cab or whatever. You're really pitted up against some of the best grapes, best winemakers in this entire area. You know, I've had winemakers that have come in and done tours of Missouri wineries and you know, from California. And you talk about the cold that we have to deal with, the heat during the summer, and all these different things. And we've had a lot of, it's happened on at least 5 to 6 different occasions where the winemaker has come back and says, you know, if I had to deal with these conditions in California, I'd quit.
One of the things that people have told me that's tough about Missouri wine, it's not even the extreme heat or the grapes shut down. I mean, if the heat gets too high, you know, imagine grapevines like people. Do you really want to work and do things when it's 9,500 degrees? So if it gets too hot, the vines shut down.
Norton's a prime example of that. I mean, you look like you've got these beautiful berries that are dark, and you think they're ripe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they just shut down. And so the pigments don't develop properly. So you get this dark-looking berry, but when you squeeze it and crush it,
it's not there.
It's not there. Your color doesn't stay. It doesn't have these nice ruby colors. It goes to brick. brick reds pretty quickly. And
You
things like
need
this.
warm, but not too warm.
Exactly.
And the other issue is if you go to winter, from what I've learned, and please correct me when I get this wrong. I always tell people, no matter how long you're in the wine business, you're always learning.
Always.
The toughest thing about Missouri is, if you go further north, they have a consistently cold winter. You go to California, they have a consistently mild winter. But if you live here in Missouri, it's that famous January thaw. So that's another thing, that the vines could be tricked into thinking that it's spring, they could bud or something like that, and then boom, or what was it, 2009 when you had that, 2007, when we had that horrible freeze in April that destroyed, 90% of the crop?
We called it the Easter Massacre.
Yeah.
On Easter weekend, we went from mid 60s, low 70s to 15 above zero.
Yeah.
And we had buds
that
6, 7, 8 inches out there, and then we lost about 92% of our entire grape crop.
And that's another thing. We're not consistent in Missouri. I mean, California, it's consistent. They know that at some point in April or May, it's not going to rain until October. Same way with Washington, Oregon, or it's not going to hit a certain temperature where certain wine regions. We don't have that dependability and predictability in Missouri.
No, and it's all over the place. Prime example is years ago when I was on the wine board, and Glenn and I were doing this. We were kind of social chairmen, and for the wine conference that we used to happen, and we would bring in a lot of the guest speakers from around the country, and sometimes from around the world, to come in and to talk at our wine conference. And so for about 4 days prior to the conference, we would take these people around the state, going from different wine regions in the state, the Augusta area, the Hermann area, the St. James area, Lake Bourgeois area, and places like this towards Kansas City and things. And even as far down as Mountain Grove, Missouri, down at the state, the experiment station down there. And I can remember this one year, we started the week off, it was 72 degrees when they flew into St. Louis. And by the time we got to, it was a February conference back then, and by the time we got down to the Lake of the Ozarks where it was being held at, we were 2 degrees below zero, all within a 5-6 day time frame.
Well, I mean,
And these guys were just an absolute, total weather shock because they didn't bring the right clothes. And they looked at it also from the areas. We looked at vineyards, we looked at winemaking, and they go, how do you guys deal with this? Because they were all used to these nice temperate climates that were so consistent. And they said, how do you literally make this wines as good as you're making with the conditions you have to deal with?
I mean,
and it is tough.
It is very, I mean, everybody talks about the great snowstorm of '82. And I remember that. I mean, I remember it was in the 60s, wearing jackets, and within 5 hours, it dropped into the low 20s, and it went from rain to 2 feet of snow. I mean, if we had consistent 20-degree weather from November to March, it would be fine, right? Or at least 40-degree weather from November to March, but we don't get that.
And that's the one thing why vinifera doesn't make it. It's their root structures and their main trunk systems are just too they're not cold hardy. So the only way that you get the ability to have a vineyard of vinifera for the most part in this state is by burying the vines when they become dormant, and it's a lot of work. That's an awful lot of work, And so sometimes it's too much work to deal with.
It has to be either a labor of love, or you're going to pay a lot per bottle,
or you're just plumb crazy. To be truthful, to try to, I mean, you can do a labor of love, but it becomes just, it's sometimes just nuts to put that much time and stuff into it.
With a lot of people talk about, oh, I would love to start a winery. I want to buy some land wherever in Missouri. What would be the thing that you would tell somebody why they would want to do it? And what would be the thing that you would
First
tell
thing I
somebody?
tell them is don't do it.
That's what I was going to ask. What would be the reason that you would tell them don't do it?
It requires, you may have, number one is if you're going to do it, you better have the right piece of property. You know, the old, when I was going to college back in the 70s, my economics professor said, you know, it goes back to what's the best thing you can do for your business is location, location, location. So it's one thing to grow grapes. If you're going to do grapes and a winery, you got to look at location, because if you're out in the middle of nowhere, it's really, you know, the old adage, if you build it, they will come. It doesn't necessarily happen. It just really doesn't.
You need that area that people are driving by. You need that tourist.
You have to have that location. Now, if you're doing grapes and that's all you want to do, fine. You can do that wherever you want to do, because with trucks you can get to anywhere.
You can sell your grapes to anybody.
The biggest problem is finding. You may have the sun exposure and the lay of the land is perfect. If your soil structure is wrong, don't even try it. The other thing I tell people is well, I only want to put in 2 or 3 acres. I said, then there's no sense in doing it. Unless you're going to do it minimum of 5, it's not commercially viable. So 5 to 10 would be the minimum that I would do. Otherwise, it doesn't pay, because you're going to have to, whether you have 1 or 2 acres or 10 acres, you're still going to have to buy an air blast sprayer. You're still going to have to buy a tractor with an enclosed cab, so that you're spraying chemicals. You're still going to have all these things, whether it's 1 acre or 10 acres, to take care of that vineyard.
You need the economy of scale.
Exactly.
So if you don't have the economy of scale, it's not worth it. I mean, it's not like we're in California where people can buy a house with 2 acres and hand do it because it's dry. You have to spray for mold and mildew. They don't have the bugs that we have here. And I'm not saying that you're constantly spraying, but there are more obstacles in the Midwest than you have in other places.
Exactly. And that it makes a difference. So, and then the critter damage just alone from birds, turkeys, squirrels, possums, coons, those can be devastating. Deer. Just to give you an example, for about 3 years in a row, we had bud growth and projected yields were going to be between, on our Norton, our 3-acre Norton, 8 to 9 tons. Mm-hmm. Okay. By the time we harvested, we were 1,500 pounds or less.
Was that the deer eating the buds?
Well, it wasn't so much the deer eating the buds. They're not crazy about Norton fruit unless they're really, really hungry.
Yeah. Well,
but squirrels love Norton fruit, whether it's ripe or whether it's green, especially in a dry year, because they're using it for moisture. Possums, coons, wild turkey. Wild turkey. I drove up to the vineyard years ago, and I counted 56 wild turkey on top of the vines, just reaching over and just plucking the berries off one at a time. And so you go through there. I mean, there was several years, 2014 I think it was, I was out there driving up every 2 hours, getting up every night, every 2 hours. We had a light bar set up on one of our gators, and I called it the police gator because it had lights flashing and all kinds of things. And we would drive through the vineyard every 2 hours chasing raccoons and possums and all these different night creatures out of there trying to save the fruit. Excuse me. We've gone to netting them now, but the squirrels get up underneath the netting and they'll come in, they'll go in looking, and they'll come out with their cheeks puffed out and everything else. One year we were putting baby pools, like kiddie pools, up there with water, trying to keep getting them to the pool to get their water. Putting corn out. So we were spending money trying to save our crop because you're trying to. you're relying on those grapes, and so you're trying to keep the critters from eating them.
So it's not this grow the grapes, make the wine, sell the wine. It's sleepless nights as if you had newborn kids waking you up every 2 hours.
Yeah, every 2 hours, the romantic part of the wine growing goes out the window. It's tough sometimes, and your critters can clean you out in a matter of days. They will eat stuff that isn't right for us to do anything with. We have to have our Nortons at a certain sugar level and acid level. And there's times when they don't make it. There's times when we pick a lot of times we pick no vignol off of our vignol vineyards. Because by the time it was ripe, we weren't ready. Wasn't ready time for us to work with fruit down in the valley, down at the winery itself, and everything was eaten up and gone.
So the question would then be to these people that ask you about starting a winery, why are you smoking and where can I get me some?
Yeah. If one question that I'm asked, how do you make money in the wine business? I said, start with a lot of money, because it'll take a lot of money to get it up. I mean, especially nowadays. It was different almost 30 years ago when we started. It was the same, but it's a lot harder now. The competition is so much more. When I started, there was less than 30 wineries in the state. Now there's 131. So a piece of that pie has gotten smaller and smaller. And then you add into that piece of the pie the micro distilleries and the microbreweries. All these things now, especially as the demographics has changed that come to the winery. The baby boomers used to be our largest wine drinking public. Now it's the millennials. The baby boomers were brand loyal.
Millennials are not.
Millennials are not. It's for the experience. Baby boomers would take stuff home. Millennials don't. So your whole business plan changes dramatically based upon your demographics of who's coming to the winery.
How has the consolidation within the wholesale network within the state affected you? I know you self-distribute, but the consolidation as far as the big guys squeezing, do you feel that they still squeeze out whether it's a small distributor, small winery, or it's...
We've been pretty fortunate to be truthful, to stay out of that battle, because we've gotten a pretty good reputation for our wine quality, for our wine products, and for the most part, we don't get into these big battles, so to speak, as they've consolidated down into it. I've had some of the bigger ones come to us and say, hey, why don't you come join us? And I said, and be screwed like everybody else has? No, thank you. We have better control of our product going out because we know what our warehousing is like. So we self-deliver, we do those particular things. And at this particular point in time, it's expensive, but it's cost effective to us to some extent because we're bringing a good quality product to those stores. There's the battle for the shelf space because the larger places, the larger wholesalers, distributors control the shelving, and so it makes it difficult at times.
It makes it difficult when they're putting the priority on what they distribute over.
Right, and then they put pressure on the liquor store manager. And what we always tell our people, if you like our wines and it's not in your local store, go pound on your liquor store manager. I said, I can go in there and say this wine's the next best thing since sliced white bread, and they're going to yell, no big deal. But you as a paying customer have the power to control those products. If you want it in there and you're willing to pay for it, they'll bring it in.
And I also tell people, folks, if there's something that you like from Adam Puchta, have your favorite retailer special order for you. Timmy will ship it out. And if your favorite retailer won't special order for you, find a different retailer that will special order it for you.
Yeah.
And they
because
can also order it from you online.
yes, we can ship online to anywhere in the state of Missouri.
Okay, let's do your port. And now, so you have Missouri signature port, so I'm going to go with the assumption that, or the hypothesis that you're making port before the United States signed that little treaty saying that we will no longer allow wines to be called port.
Correct. We're grandfathered in as long as we never change the label.
Okay.
So there's nothing can change in the label. We do our anniversary port, which is our oak aged port, which is more of a vintage style port. And then we do our signature port, which is going to be more of a, I call it more of a super ruby, if that's a term one can use. It's a younger port, but it's also got some body. It doesn't have the harshness and the burn like a lot of the ruby ports do, the really young ports.
You don't have that alcohol burn.
Exactly.
If you can find port is wonderful. This has that sweetness, but it's not overly sweet. It has that weight, but you don't get that alcohol burn at the end. Now, what's the neutral spirit that you put in?
We've tried all kinds of different spirits, and every so many years we will actually go do a spirit tasting, which gets quite interesting. You get 10 or 15 spirits out there to do a tasting. It doesn't take long for it to blow your taste buds. But what we try to do, the winemaker and myself, what we try to do is look for something that doesn't color the wine. You can get some of the spirits that we'll get in that are, my terminology would be called dirty and gritty, and they just have this dirtiness to them that just doesn't go well. Or you'll have the ones that are done in oak, so they already come. The brandies that are already colored that come to you, and that's not what we're looking for. So we're getting this middle range here of trying to find something that's reasonably inexpensive, but still gives us the opportunity to have something that's a quality product that doesn't color what we're trying to add to it, so that it has a certain quality to it without detracting from the wine that we're putting it into.
What do you like to drink with your port? I mean, what do you like to eat when drinking this port?
I tend to not be a dessert person.
Really?
I'd rather have, with ports like these, I tend to like strong cheeses, some blue cheeses and things like that with some candied nuts. Something just lightly candied, not
Like
heavily.
a big Maytag cheese plate.
Yeah.
And,
Okay. Yeah, well, even some of the
Spanish
heavier,
caramel walnuts.
yeah, I'll even eat like the Jarlsberg Swiss that has a lot of body to it and stuff. I like cheeses, so I'll eat a cheese plate. I'll work with ports and cheese before I'll do anything else. Now, at the winery, I know my son, we'll do certain things. We've done poached pears with port sauce, port reduction on it. We've done, he does a wine that it's along the lines, it's basically our sherry product, so it's not this particular product, but it's a wine called 1855, which is it's done just like a sherry. And he'll take the 1855, put it into the cake mix. It's an old German Kuchen recipe, and then he'll use it also in the actual icing that he puts it into.
Nice.
And that produces this great creaminess and these wonderful flavors, and then serve it with that. Now with the ports here, I tend to do cheeses and things like that, but you can do all kinds of different desserts and stuff with it. Chocolates. This port actually exhibits a little bit of that chocolate background to it, so anything with chocolate in it, dark chocolate, goes really